Welcome to Dawn of the New Earth. My name is Morgue. I'm an ex-Christian revealing hidden information to create a new world and transform consciousness. And today we are talking about the secret meaning of the crucifixion of Jesus Christ. And we're going to see that hidden within it is actually a deeply symbolic structure that has a blueprint for spiritual transformation. It contains the key for your transformation, because it's not about looking at the crucifixion as a historical event. It's about looking and seeing what deep meaning is encoded with something like this. And we're going to see it's a deeply symbolic journey of transformation. And what's really wild about all this is how it perfectly mirrors the steps of alchemy, which isn't about, as you know, if you've seen my other videos, not literally about turning lead into gold, but transforming yourself, your soul, into something higher. And so we're going to break all this down because this is an extremely powerful metaphor for anyone seeking to evolve spiritually. And we're going to see that it becomes the key to reaching higher and higher levels of consciousness and how it relates to our system of inner star actualization as well. So that's why I want to talk about this today. You guys know that I usually talk about alchemy on Mondays. We are continuing to talk about alchemy. But before we get started on understanding in depth each of the steps, I want to go over how the steps of alchemy is encoded within the story of the crucifixion of Christ. And one thing I want to throw out there real quick for you is if, Christ in the Bible leaves a bad taste in your mouth, don't worry. I completely understand. I'm an ex-Christian. But here's the thing, is that the interpretation of Christ that we have is the Gnostic interpretation of Christ. So Christ, understood Gnostically or esoterically, is much closer to the archetype that Lucifer represents. In other words, not as Satan, but as the light bringer. Just like, Lucifer was called the light bringer, Jesus Christ was called the morning star. Just like Lucifer was called the morning star, Jesus Christ is also called the morning star, because they represent very similar archetypal patterns of liberation and transformation. And this means you don't need to worship any god to attain salvation. It means that you are your own savior. It means that you are your own liberator. It means that you are your own redeemer. And so the message of the Gnostic Christ isn't believe in me or you're going to go to hell. It's know thyself and you can become like me and even greater than some Gnostics believed. So we're going to be taking a look at this metaphorical journey, this understanding of the symbolism of the crucifixion and how it relates to inner alchemy. It's going to be really good. That's what we're doing right now. I want to remind you, if you enjoy my work, become a member here on YouTube by hitting the join button or on Patreon, and you'll get access to all of our members only videos. But also at any tier, you'll get access to my alchemy notes that are downloadable PDFs. There are 3 of them out right now. I'm going to release a 4th one for this video. And they're extremely helpful for understanding alchemy and the transformative steps that it entails in a very simple and easy to understand way. Also, my books are available. Make sure you check them out. If you're interested in self-transformation, this would be the one to check out. It's Psychogenesis, Self and Universal Transformation. It talks about inner star actualization, how to reach the highest levels of consciousness, and will forming, manifesting your will into reality. So that's what I would recommend. Or you could start with book 1. Neogenesis, Dawn of the New Mind. Oh, and I've had a bunch of people asking me about my shirt. This is the Sigil of Lilith. That's also available at the links. All the links to all this stuff is in the description of this video. Anyway, enough about that. Let's get started. So we're going to be taking a look at the crucifixion of Jesus Christ and how this relates to the 7 steps of inner alchemy, how it's encoded. And it's actually very cool. And like I said, if Jesus gives you a bad taste in your mouth, like I said, I used to be Christian, so I completely understand that, but this is completely different than the traditional Christian understanding of Jesus Christ. Like in the Gospel of Philip, it says, anyone who understands this is no longer a Christian, but a Christ. It's about becoming Christ. It's about becoming divine. And this is a metaphorical pathway to self-transformation and reaching the status of the divine. So this is also a really good way to understand how we can map different concepts into different systems. Like I said before, when you start to learn alchemy, it's really helpful for learning later on, learning things like magic and tarot and ritual and Kabbalah. if you understand alchemy, you'll be able to understand those systems a lot easier because they have a lot of mappings and correspondences that are common to those systems. So we can see how we can do the same thing by taking a look at the esoteric symbolism in the story of Christ's crucifixion. So it's a way of seeing how to do that. And let's see here. I think we should just get started then. So I feel like I had one other thing that I wanted to mention, but I can't remember what it is, but it'll come to me, I'm sure. Let's get started. So before we jump into the metaphor and symbolism and breaking down the symbolism and secrets of the crucifixion, I just want to give a brief overview of the 7 steps of inner alchemy, because this is going to relate and be very necessary to understand. So last time we took a look at the 7 steps of inner alchemy. Just as a quick review, the 7 steps are represented by the 7 planetary metals. Okay, so you start with Saturn, which is lead, and Jupiter, which is tin, Mars, which is iron, Venus, which is copper, Mercury, which is quicksilver, the moon, which is silver, and the sun, which is gold. So transforming lead into gold is not literally about doing it with literal metal. It's about an allegorical symbolic system for higher and higher states of consciousness. Okay, so for example, Saturn is the first planetary metal with lead, and the first step of inner alchemy is called calcination. So calcination is about burning away false identities and beliefs to reveal that you're a lot more than all your conditioned beliefs. So in other words, it's a destruction phase. It represents the destruction of the false, so making way for ultimately deeper realizations. This step, the second step, is the step of dissolution. And this is about going down into the deep waters of the unconscious. It's confronting all your repressed thoughts and traumas and discovering inner archetypes like your shadow self. And it often manifests as the dark night of the soul, where it can be a very confusing time. Existential questioning happens here. And then the third step is separation in Mars. And this is about actually integrating your shadow self. So before it was just about like discovering your unconscious, understanding that it exists. This step is about actually integrating your shadow self to become whole. And then in this fourth step is conjunction, which is represented by Venus. And this represents merging your inner opposites, harmonizing inner opposites together. This is often represented as harmonizing the inner masculine and feminine energies, but you don't have to think about it in terms of gender, but it usually is symbolically expressed in terms of gender. But you can just understand it in terms of like harmonizing logic and intuition, for example, or senses and emotions, or the unconscious and the conscious, harmonizing all the different opposites within yourselves so that you are a full, complete, and whole individual. Like I said, this is usually represented by the integration of the inner feminine or the inner masculine, but it doesn't have to be put in those terms. Then we get over to Mercury. And so in Mercury, there so the first 4 are associated with elements. In the last 3, we step away from the elemental domain and enter into the more spiritual domain. Okay. So the 5th step is Mercury and quicksilver. And this is about it's a step of fermentation, but there's 2 parts to it. There's putrefaction and fermentation. Putrefaction is about removing any built-up ego identification so that you don't contaminate any integration that you're going to be doing. For example, you know, after doing all this, you might think, oh, I'm such an amazing ascended master. Everyone else is so below me, so beneath me. So it's kind of like doing another double check to make sure that you remove any harmful identifications there. And then fermentation is about accessing your power self, basically like your purpose and your meaning. And then the moon, which is related to silver, is called distillation, and it's about connecting to your inner star, your true self, your higher self. As you've done all this work and all this integration, you're beginning to connect to your higher self, your true self, your eternal self, your divine self, rather than your egoic lower self. You're connecting, you're making and connecting to that higher self. And then finally, the sun, which represents gold, is the step of coagulation, which is the final step where you've integrated, you've connected to your higher self, your inner star. The solar step, the step of the sun, the step of gold, is about bringing that into the material world, which means like manifesting your will into existence. Like here, it's kind of like your head, you've connected to your higher self, but your head is kind of up in the clouds. Now it's about bringing that light down onto the earth in terms of bringing your will, your higher will, your elevated will into reality, manifesting it, not just sitting there thinking about it all the time like a hermit, but rather manifesting it, your will, into reality. Okay, so I know that was very quick. Like I said, I have notes for all this, and you can check out the previous video if you want more detail on all this. But the reason why I'm bringing this up is because this is important for understanding the metaphor and symbolism of the crucifixion in terms of these 7 stages and 7 steps. So how can we do that? So we already looked at how, let's see, we looked at, let me bring this back up so you guys can see everything. The first step is calcination, okay? And so calcination corresponds to, so remember, we're gonna talk about a symbolic journey, a symbolic mapping of the journey of the soul in terms of the symbolism of the crucifixion. So the step 1 of calcination is the crucifixion itself. It is the death of the ego. And so the crucifixion, the actual step of being crucified, is the alchemical step of calcination, the destruction of the old self. That is what calcination is. It's about burning away everything false, everything that isn't real about you. And so Christ on the cross symbolizes the destruction of the old self, letting go of attachments, beliefs, fears, everything that holds you back, everything that has been conditioned into you. And it's a painful process. Yes, it's a very difficult process. Everything that you thought you were, you realize isn't actually you. It's been conditioned into you by outside sources like religion and friends and family, etc. So essentially, the process of being purified by fire in the calcination process of alchemy corresponds to the crucifixion and death of Christ on the cross. That's what that represents. This is where transformation begins, okay? It's about burning away everything that doesn't serve you, or crucifying the old self. That is what occurs here, okay? So now we move on to a few other steps. And what's really interesting about this is, let's see how we can do this here. So after this, we're going to have 3 steps. And these 3 steps here mirror the 3 days that Christ spent in the tomb. Okay? Because remember, Jesus died and was in the tomb for 3 days and rose again on the 3rd day. So the step here, that is the step of dissolution, remember what that represents? Dissolution is about sinking into the unconscious, going down into the depths of the mind. It's the dark night of the soul. We move in terms of alchemy, it is the process of dissolution. In terms of the crucifixion, it's moving into the tomb. This is the stage of dissolution, where the body is gone, well, it's laid to rest, and in alchemical terms, you're sinking down into your unconscious mind. Now, it's very messy, it's uncomfortable, you're confronting all the stuff that you've buried, a lot of fears and doubts, your shadow self, your old wounds, but this step is necessary. The tomb is where everything begins to break down and preparing you for what's to come. So the first day is that descent into the unconscious mind, the dark night of the soul, beginning to confront all your unconscious aspects. Day 1, the tomb. Day 2, which is the process of separation, which is in alchemy related by iron and Mars. But this is day 2 in terms of the symbolism of the crucifixion. And what does this represent? This is what's known as the harrowing of hell. So essentially, this is about facing and integrating the shadow. This was just about becoming aware of your dark aspects, basically, your unconscious dark aspects. So this was a death of the self. This was going into the tomb and going into the unconscious and realizing your unconscious structures, all your hidden darkness. This is about facing the shadow, and it's called harrowing of hell. This is, in alchemy, like I said, means not just facing your shadow, but beginning to integrate it. It's the parts that you've been afraid to confront. Now, in terms of the crucifixion, Christ descends to hell. And this symbolizes going deep into those dark corners of your psyche. So the shadow self is also often represented by like demons and hell. In symbolic terms, demons and hell is often associated with the shadow self. And it's about confronting that and integrating it. And so in this story as well, Jesus goes down into hell. And it's often said that he redeems the righteous souls in hell. So this can be about going deep down into the unconscious mind, confronting the shadow self, and integrating it within to become whole and transformed, facing one's own darkness, facing one's own hell, facing one's own demons. Now, the 4th day is really cool. I like this one a lot. So the 4th day is conjunction. And it's about harmonizing dualities. And remember, in terms of alchemy, it's about unifying opposites, like the conscious and the unconscious. What in the Neogenian system, what we call the mirror self, or in Jungian terms, the anima or animus, or inner masculine or inner feminine. So it's about unifying opposites, unifying polarities, often in terms of masculine and feminine. And this is really cool because what happens on the 3rd day, this is where harmony begins, because who shows up on the 3rd day? Mary Magdalene. Mary Magdalene shows up on the 3rd day. She's the first to visit the tomb, and she's the first to see Christ after the resurrection. So in other words, her presence on day 3 represents the divine feminine meeting the divine masculine. And this moment symbolizes balancing your inner opposites, whether you want to think about it in terms of gender or not, logical and intuitive, active and receptive, unconscious, conscious, masculine, feminine, negative, positive, whatever you want, however you want to label it. That's what this is about. And of course, this is also symbolized by Venus, which is the symbol of love and bringing things together. So, and Mary Magdalene is extremely archetypal for being Christ's feminine counterpart. This is why Christ kisses her in the Gospel of Philip. And this is why she's so prominent in that gospel as well, as being the partner or consort of Jesus Christ. She represents the feminine aspect of Christ, essentially. And so this is on the 3rd day. So now what happens is that we've gone from the crucifixion to the 3 days in the tomb. Now we're going to get to these last 3, but remember, these last 3 are different. These last 3 are going from a physical, or rather elemental process, and then we're moving up to that spiritual process. And of course, this is what happens when the resurrection takes place. So we've already had the crucifixion. We've had the in the tomb, descent into the tomb for 3 days. Now we're moving up a level higher in terms of resurrection, awakening the spirit. So in this stage, in alchemy, this is fermentation. It's basically when the divine spark is being awakened. You start discovering your power self, your true purpose. And Christ rising from the tomb represents the rebirth of the spiritual self. Now, remember, fermentation has kind of 2 aspects to it. There's the putrefaction aspect and the fermentation aspect. So the putrefaction aspect is about, it's another process of destroying egoic elements that could be getting in the way. That's what we did in stage 1, where we destroyed the old But remember, new attachments can accumulate when you go through this process of being like, oh, I'm so amazing, I'm so awesome. There's nothing wrong with having pride, that's fine. But if you start to lord it over others, that would be like the negative aspect of, like the false interpretation of Christ. That would be like a Christ who goes, oh yes, I am the ascended master, so worship me. That would be like missing the putrefaction point. If you skip the putrefaction step, something like that can happen, where you have, oh yeah, you become like a psychopath, like someone who's lording your power over others rather than being a teacher, helping others to helping others to raise themselves up. So you want to go through the putrefaction first, which is the continuation of the decay of the old self. And this is represented by the fact that in the tomb, the body of Christ is gone. The body has disappeared. So here, you had the crucifixion of the body, and then you had the body in the tomb for 3 days. Now the body has completely gone, and one is being united with their divine purpose. So you're starting to enter into this more spiritual phase, because you've basically have done the work of this integration. And now as you integrate in the power self, you're becoming to be aware of your true purpose, your true meaning. Okay? And so when we move on to the step of the moon, which in alchemical terms we know is distillation, this is where we connect to the higher self. And in terms of Christ, this is the stage of ascension. This is about connecting to your true. So once you've integrated all these aspects of yourself, gone through putrefaction, removed anything blocking you, and started to realize your true purpose, your connection to your true self, your higher self, your inner star will start to take place. And so this is about really connecting to your divine essence. And this is the point represented by Christ ascending to heaven. It's the ultimate symbol of spiritual clarity and unity with the divine, or your true self. And so for us, this means transcending old limitations, evolving, integrating, individuating, until we become a whole, powerful individual that understands what we truly are, that we are an eternal mind, the very ground and essence of all reality, not just a body, not just a brain, that we are an eternal being of divine power. And so that is what ascension represents. But here's the problem, because we want to get to the last stage, which is represented by the sun and gold. And this is represented by the kingdom of heaven on earth. Because if we just ascend and stay in the clouds all day, how is that going to help anything? So this step, you can think of the sun shining its rays down onto the earth. This is the step of manifestation, building the kingdom of heaven on earth. And it's called coagulation. You're coagulating it. You're making it real. This is not just the integration of everything, but about bringing the divine will into this world. And this in alchemical terms is represented by salt, because salt is material, but it's a crystal, so it has a very beautiful structure. So it represents spirit in matter. It also gives flavor to things and preserves things. This is why Christ said to become the salt of the world. So this is about embodying your higher self and creating a life that reflects your transformation, living your purpose, making your internal growth manifest in the external world. So this crucifixion narrative isn't just some story. It's a roadmap for transformation. This isn't just Christ's journey. This is your journey. All the way from the destruction of the old self to ultimately manifesting your divine purpose, your divine will. And so whether you call it alchemy or self-work or spiritual evolution, the message is the same, that transformation is possible, but it requires going through the fire, diving into the depths and rising anew, or being crucified, buried in the tomb, and rising again, ascending to heaven, and shining your will down onto the world You bring, when you do all this, you don't just change yourself. You bring a piece of heaven into the world until the world becomes heaven. The kingdom of heaven is within and all around you. So when you access heaven, the kingdom, in your mind, because remember, Christ said the kingdom is within you and around you. This is the step of realizing it's in you. This is the step of bringing it into the world and manifesting it. So you have the stage of crucifixion, the 3 stages in the tomb, the 3 days in the tomb, which represents diving into the unconscious. The first day, the dark night of the soul, the harrowing of hell, and the 3rd day in which Mary Magdalene arrives, which is becoming familiar with your unconscious structures, integrating the shadow self, integrating your inner opposite. Then the resurrection, which requires the disappearance of the body and putrefaction and connecting to your true purpose, fermentation, the power self, connecting to your higher self, your inner star, your divine self, and then manifesting that into the world, building the kingdom of heaven here on earth. And so when we take a look at this, archetypal journey, this archetypal story, there's a couple things that I want to mention here, because you can see that it clearly fits the 7 steps of inner alchemy very well. And the reason why I want to bring this up, and the reason why I brought this up to begin with, is because I was going to talk about the first step of alchemy, which is calcination, and I was going to talk about crucifixion, but then I realized, well, we didn't even talk about this yet, so I wanted to lay that out here so we could begin to understand. But what I want to show too is, and this is a really good point, as we learn alchemy, this is a good point to begin to see how all these different systems and way of looking at the world begins to connect to each other. So you could think of it in terms of, like I said, if you want to do self-transformation and build that symbolic map to your unconscious mind, you can do it in terms of, let's say, alchemy and turning metal into gold. You could also do it in terms of the crucifixion, your old self dying and rising again. It's we looked at the symbolism before, where it was the stage of sulfur, which would be the 6th stage in that alchemical diagram we looked at, was represented by the phoenix. The phoenix, who when dies turns to ashes and then rises again and has a rebirth from the ashes of the old. And so whether you're talking about the phoenix rising again, or Jesus being raised from the dead, or turning lead into gold, these are all symbolic systems communicating the same idea. And here's the cool thing about it, is you can choose the system that resonates the most with you. If alchemy resonates most with you and the crucifixion of Christ seems dumb, you don't have to have anything to do with that. You can stick with changing metal into gold. If you think metal into gold sounds kind of silly, that's kind of weird, it doesn't really resonate with me, but being your own savior, your own Christ, the liberator and divine, and going through that process of death and resurrection into divinity and building the kingdom of heaven on earth, if that resonates with you, then you can go with that. Or you can go with both and have both symbolic mappings that you can use to access this archetypal journey. And so this is just one example of how we're going to see that all these different systems, all these different symbols relate to one another, whether we're talking about alchemy or magic or tarot or Kabbalah or Christian mysticism or Gnosticism. These are all going to have correspondences and relationships. And so another point that I want to make out here is, as you can see, like this maps very, very well onto alchemy. And so I think a question that some people may ask is that what the crucifixion story really means? Like, when it was created, was that the intent behind it? And so here's the answer to that. The answer to that is, it doesn't matter. Because when it comes to this, we always have to remember, what are we doing here? We're not looking for objective truth. If we were looking for objective truth, we would be talking about meta-rationalism or cosmogenesis or neogenesis or that's what we do when we look for objective truth. What we're doing here isn't looking for objective truth. We're building a subjective symbolic language to communicate with your unconscious. So it's not about, oh, did this really happen? Or is this really what was intended? It doesn't matter. So it's kind of like tarot cards, for example. Tarot cards, if you pull a certain card, sure, it has a certain meaning to it. But guess what? Some cards are pretty universal, but there's a lot of cards where you'll look up the definition for it and everyone will have a different interpretation. Some people will say, oh, this means harmony. Another person will be like, no, it's not. Look at they have angry faces. It means they're not getting along or whatever. Everyone's going to be arguing about the definition of different things. But the thing is what matters is what it means to you, what you get from it. So if you look at a tarot card, for example, it's not about objectively, what does this card mean? If you learn the correspondences, it can be helpful to kickstart your intuition. But ultimately, what you want to do is look at the card and say, what does the card tell me? What do I resonate with? What does it mean to me? And so when you look at these various stories and you begin to explore the symbolic mappings behind them, it ultimately doesn't matter if any of these things happened or not, or what the original intention was behind it. What matters is, does it resonate with you, and does it help you transform yourself and make that link to your unconscious mind? Because that is what really matters. That's what really is important. And when you understand that, that's one of the major keys. Everything will fall into place. It might take a little while, but eventually will, because I see so many people online who get into this stuff and they're arguing back and forth about what different things mean. And no, you're wrong. This means that. It's like a dream. It's going to mean something different to each person. And yes, we can come up with systems where we agree on certain things to be able to communicate ideas with each other. But ultimately, it's up to us to decide what it's going to mean for us. Like when you go to sleep and dream, for example, your dream is your unconscious mind trying to communicate some idea to you, trying to bring something to your attention. And so you have to look at the dream images and decode it to try and figure out what your unconscious is trying to tell you. So let's say that you have a dream about a crying child. You keep having this dream over and over about this crying child. And you're like, what the heck is my unconscious trying to tell me? What am I trying to... And you do dream analysis and end up discovering, oh, it means that I need to nurture my inner child, that I need to have fun. I need to, have some playtime because my inner child is being neglected. Symbolically speaking, that's why I'm dreaming about a child that's crying. And so understanding that, so you have the dream, you analyze the dream, and then you integrate it. What does integrate mean? Integrate means deal with it. So you find a way to, if you're going to integrate that lesson, what you're going to do is then find a way to nurture your inner child, find a way to have more fun, play more, etc. But here's a really important point. Did that dream really mean that? Probably, but it might not have. Maybe you objectively interpreted it incorrectly. Maybe it actually meant something else. But ultimately, if it helped you realize something like, oh, wow, I'm neglecting my inner child and I need more play in my life to live a better life, then ultimately it doesn't matter because it helped you. It aided you. And so when we look at like these different esoteric systems, it's often like dreaming, because these are symbols that are going to resonate with you in a personal way. Same thing with alchemy. Like we talk about the 7 steps of alchemy. If you look up alchemy, some people will say there's 7 steps. Some people will say there's 10 steps. Some people will say there's 13 steps. Some people put the metals in different positions, and some people will argue about with each other about which one's the right one. And it doesn't matter. It's about constructing this symbolic map so that you can connect with your unconscious. And that's really key and really important. And I think that's one reason why I wanted to talk about this today, was to show how you can build these correspondences in systems that resonate with you. And whatever works for you the best, whatever you resonate with the best, can be. So for example, like maybe the the symbolism of Christ doesn't resonate with you, but maybe you can find something in, let's say, Hindu symbolism, or something that doesn't have to do with, like the Typhonian Order uses the Cthulhu mythos. They use H.P. Lovecraft's. They use the dark gods of H.P. Lovecraft. Now, obviously, these dark gods don't literally exist, but they represent archetypes. So here's another point as well. Like I talked about the crucifixion of Christ, like, was that really what was intended when it was written? Well, the other thing is that this is often projected, and that those who create stories often don't know that they're projecting archetypal journeys, that they're projecting archetypal metaphors. This is why you can have lots of stories from all over the world that follow the same general pattern. But because artists often don't know that they're connecting to these archetypal patterns and expressing them in a certain way. And so that this happens a lot. And Carl Jung was very intrigued by this. And when you look at the different like myths and legends of old, you can see that, oh, they reflect the structure of the psyche of humanity at that time, at that level. And so all the different stories, all the different legends, all the different myths are really a projection and expression of the human psyche at the time when it was written or projected or created. So we have all of these systems available to us to be able to build that map from the unconscious realm to the conscious realm and vice versa. So we have them working in tandem, working together in unity and harmony. So here's what I want to know from you guys, because I think we're going to wrap this one up. I want to know from you guys, first of all, did that make sense to you? Did the steps of the crucifixion make sense to you in terms of inner alchemy? What I also want to know from you guys is, does showing correspondences like this help, or is it more confusing? Like, for example, talking about, oh, look, we can show how the 7 steps of inner alchemy also relate to the process of crucifixion, resurrection, and ascension. Does comparing and showing the connection there help? Or is it like, oh, that's a little too confusing, just stick to one thing? I'm curious to know, because this helps me understand what direction to go in and what to bring in terms of teaching these ideas. So let me know in the comments. Tell me what you think. I'm going to be making my notes for this video available to anyone who's a member in PDF format. You'll be able to download it in the member section. So join the channel, become a member. It helps out a lot. You get access. That'll be the 4th alchemy PDF. Make sure you check out my book, Psychogenesis, Psychogenesis, Self and Universal Transformation. And I want to give a big shout out to everyone who supports. I really appreciate it, especially Renaissance Fairy, Cassidy, Angela, DB, Nusalina, Dallas, Digital Tech, David, LaDonna, Grace, Kira, Val, and everyone else. Thank you very much.